everyone. I'm Bertie from Eurogamer, and this is a storytelling panel as introed by Carmageddon there. So we all have stories. Papa Smurf reading there. True stories. Fiction. Notice the American. And for as long as games could tell stories, they have, of course. Pleasure suit Larry there. Oh, hold on a second, I'm sorry, I've messed it up. Here we go. So when the internet came along, internet serious business, everything changed. People started sharing their stories in mugs. And then the floodgates opened. So we still get stories told to us in a more classical sense, people as in, telling us their story. But more and more, the stories being told are ours. Stories, emergent stories, such as Minecraft and this other game, DayZ. So here to talk about that and talk about kind of the evolution of storytelling in games are my panelists, and I'm going to introduce you to them now. So I'll start right here with Mike Bithell, the creator of Thomas Was Alone and Volume.
Hello.
Hello, Mike. Which gaming story sticks out for you in your life?
Wow, that's a good question that you fortunately gave us about 10 minutes ago. So I had time to think of an answer. But annoyingly, the answer I came up with was the incredibly obvious one, which is Half-Life. Which is a game that I played. I know I was definitely 15, 16 because I was late to my prom.
What, were you near the end or something? How?
I was at the bit. It was the so it was close to the end. It was the bit with the assassins kind of show up, and I was just really in the zone. And my mum ended up driving me to my my end of secondary school prom.
So did you get time to finish the game? Was that?
No, but I got to go to a party I wasn't allowed to drink at. So
rubbish.
Anyway, this is. I feel we've gone off. Half-Life's brilliant. No, I think for me, I remember playing Half-Life. It was that kind of. I just played Deus Ex and Metal Gear Solid, and then Half-Life. It feels like I was just the right age at the right time for when games started telling stories in ways that were unique to games, environmental storytelling, these kind of interactions that tell a story rather than just a series of cutscenes. And yeah, it was a great time, and we're all now ripping them off on a daily basis, which is great.
Creating new things, thank you. Next guest is Holly Gramazio, pronouncing it right, a freelance game designer and used to work for Hide and Seek. Holly, what gaming memory sticks out for you? What story sticks out for you?
Probably, I mostly work in games with the real world element, so things where there are performers or things that happen in museums or public space or that kind of thing. So the gaming story that sticks out for me and the game that made me get into all of that stuff is a game called Journey to the End of the Night, which was designed by a group called SF0, but it's been run all over the world. And it doesn't have a plot, really, or at least if it does have a plot, it's usually less good than the runs without a plot. But what it does really, really cleverly is set things up so people have their own peculiar experiences and make their own stories within it, which they then share. So I turned up with 3 friends. I'd moved to London 5 months previously from Australia, didn't really know my way around it at all. Turned up with 3 friends outside this massive abandoned warehouse in East London, and we were given a map with 5 checkpoints on it and told we had to get to those 5 checkpoints in order, and we had 3 hours because the last checkpoint was on the banks of the Thames at low tide, and if we didn't get there in 3 hours, then it would no longer be there. And that was all fair enough, and we started planning our routes. And then some gates opened way up on the abandoned warehouse, and some performers stepped out wearing red ribbons. We all had white ribbons so we could recognise each other. They had red ribbons, and they all looked quite fit and energetic. And also one of them was in those big springy things that make you run really fast. And we were told that we had 2 minutes and then they'd be chasing us. And if they caught us, they'd take our white ribbon and give us a red ribbon, and we'd become one of them. And it was just the most extraordinary evening. It was hours and hours of running around frantically. My legs ached for days afterwards. For a couple of weeks, whenever I saw someone wearing red out of the corner of my eye on the tube or something, I would jump. But the tiny little bits of story that we as players developed from that, the things about at the time my friend Josh ran across the road, literally risking his life in order to draw some chasers away from us so we could get down one alleyway. The time Josh inevitably got caught and betrayed us and chased us down and eventually ended up isolating one of us in a park and chasing him for 10 minutes frantically. All of these tiny moments of bravery or betrayal were kind of the thing that made me decide I wanted to do game design.
Oh yeah, it sounds like a very powerful experience, and the sort of experience that we're seeing more and more with people. I don't want to say water cooler moments, but you know that point where people come into work or whatever and say, "Look, well, I did this." Thank you. Moving on to my next guest, Ed Stern, writer for Splash Damage. You may have seen him on not this stage, but a Red stage before last year. Hello, Ed.
Hello.
Which story in gaming sticks out for you?
I fear this is going to be quite a generational thing, but Deus Ex, the first Deus Ex game. It was the first game that I didn't know what the right answer was. And every game up to that point had been clear, oh okay, this is a puzzle made by the designer and there is an optimal outcome. And you're trying to intuit or guess or brute force the best way. And you get to the end of it and he says, no, what are your values? What do you believe? I think that was the first, and also it was just really interestingly written. And it was full of stuff like, oh, the Illuminati, I've heard of them. Oh, I didn't know that about them. It was smarter than I was. It was better written than anything I'd done. And it was just, it really, obviously Half-Life as well. Just like, oh look, grown-ups made this. This is worthy of time and attention. And I think prior to that point, it was like, people make these, really? That was the first thing I got a sense of real authorship and kind of expertise in that way. And I've ripped that off every day since, as well as Half-Life, yes.
Well, yeah, copying is the highest form, imitating the highest form of flattery. So our final guest, you might recognise him. He's been in a couple of sessions so far. It's Dean Hall, the creator of DayZ, and one of the games that is making people talk about stories in a different way. Lots of different stories that are popping up out of the game. Dean, what story or moment, story in games sticks out to you?
I have a disappointing thing for you, actually, Bertie. Dean Hall is currently not here. Dean Hall is currently under a table being chased by an alien. Because someone suggested that I play Alien Isolation just before this panel. So all I can really think is, help me, I'm stuck under a table and the alien's
So
chasing
you're
me.
army trained, you can deal with this.
Yes, I did. I dealt with it perfectly fine up until the point I panicked. And then they showed me that you can hide under the table, and then I was like, okay, that's fine. This is where I'm staying. And
this is my safe place.
This is my safe place.
It is comfortable under there, isn't it?
It's very comfortable. Anyway, I did, in my delirium and panic, I have managed to think of one game. For me, it was actually Police Quiz. So the Sierra game, you had Leisure Suit Larry up there, because I was really young and it made me feel like I was a police officer and I was in this little town, and I don't know, maybe I was just at the right age to sort of understand some of that stuff, and so it actually let me do it. And I never really played a lot on the Amiga. I never really played a lot of games that made me really feel like I was doing it. Like it had this adult storyline, and I was this teenager, and it was kind of like you said, it was like adults made this, and I was kind of coming to the club, and it's not, I guess, the most open world type game, but it really did put me in, and I think I was really hooked at that point.
Fantastic. So, you all make games, which is why you're here. Ed, I might jump to you for this one. What are the golden rules for telling a story in games?
Oh, let me tell you. For what?
For telling a story, for storytelling in games.
Turn up for work dressed and sober.
I'll never say
every thought out loud. Depends on the game. I think one of the things that's very obvious, this is going to become clear through this session, and is increasingly obvious looking at the industry, is the term video game or games is just ludicrously broad. And I think within 10 years it's going to seem impossible that we ever used this one term to cover everything from physical games to board games to card games to platform-specific games to, you know, whatever gamer culture is. I mean, at what point do we just say people play games? This is no longer. It's like, well, what about by people games? You know, what about games for people who breathe? Yeah, I agree. That definitely counts for me. I work in predominantly kind of genre multiplayer PC stuff. I've done some console stuff as well, but it's very much kind of cosplay paintball. Is that an unkind way of putting it?
That's a new genre, yeah.
But you know, the story of a multiplayer game is that you go online and play a game with your friends. There's not so much in terms of authored narrative, in terms of a linear thing where you play through a level and you uncover stuff and you get stuff at the end. It's, when done right, it's infinitely replayable. I mean, BioShock, a wonderfully authored game, but we all brought something unique to it, but we all played the same game. Maybe a different difficulty settings, but in terms of the narrative, it was laid out for us. Maybe we missed some stuff, but it was the same beautifully authored narrative. For multiplayer stuff, it's a sandbox, a rule set, and a toolkit to forge your own experiences. And I think that's increasingly true of, well, it's always been true of physical games. It's getting more true of open. I mean, DayZ is a perfect example. I never would have thought. I find it really positive, the thought that people are embracing such a hard, unforgiving, you know, there's no breadcrumbing, there's no easy way in. You die all the time in a variety of incredibly paranoia-inducing ways. For us, or for, you know, conventional multiplayer games, there's a certain genre expectation that helps if you played a game like that before. And then it's got variations on the theme. So you can have too much narrative, you can suddenly have too little. It's like, well, hang on, this might as well just be painful. And other times it's, no wait, I must tell you everything that's happened here for the last 50 years. It's like, I'm playing a game here. It's not. So it depends on the project. You can certainly have too rich a narrative environment, and you can certainly have too bland a narrative environment. And I have made both of those mistakes.
Mike, what works for you when telling a story in the game? Because you don't necessarily have that multiplayer community building stuff, so it's quite mechanical for your games. How do you approach that?
Well, I'm very much in the old school kind of authored kind of game narrative thing, or at least I was. Thomas Was Alone is a very linear story. You can't have any effect on what lays out there. The stuff that I was interested in exploring, like you say, is the is where player action becomes a part of the storytelling, where you mirror what the player's doing, and where you intentionally subvert that. You know, obviously, we all got very excited about saying ludonarrative dissonance last year. Most of the people using it were using it in the wrong context, but it's fine. Go on, quip.
Now it's the year of Luigi narrative.
It's the year of Luigi narrative. But that's interesting, because it's the same, so I always equate it to action movies. You know, John McClane, Die Hard, that story is told via what he does to people and how he explores the world. It's very, very applicable. I do a whole really boring talk about this. But it's a video game narrative. And so when Thomas Was Alone, it became a really interesting challenge to make sure that a platformer was conveying character personalities. So daft stuff like there's a character who can float in water called Claire. The thought process was, okay, so a character who can float in water in a world where no one else can, they're going to think they're a superhero. That's going to be a massive, awesome thing, and they're going to get an ego about it. They're going to become a bit arrogant, a little bit annoying, but also kind of lovable. And you start playing with this stuff. Volume's an interesting case of trying to make a game where player action actually informs ethics and morality, and you play a character who doesn't kill people. And you can't do what? He doesn't kill people, I know. I am innovating all over the place. But yeah, so he doesn't kill people, and then that becomes interesting, because actually if you make the player play in a certain way for a few hours, when you have the player, when you kind of do narrative stuff around that as well, you can kind of explore things. I mean, Spec Ops famously inverted it in a way that shocked a lot of people, which was cool. But yeah, that's the stuff that really interests me, is actually kind of being aware that there's a player playing a game and they're sat in their pants, holding a controller, doing their thing. And then also I'm telling my story with my voice actors and my script and my soundtrack and all that stuff. and actually having fun with where the overlaps occur and where things kind of influence each other. That's kind of my thing.
Yeah, brilliant, thank you. Holly, we'll come back to you in a second, but Dean, before we do, there are lots of stories that come out of DayZ, and they all seem incredible. Are there any that have really stuck out to you, really, that you still remember when you think?
I guess I do tend to tell the same stories again and again, so I'm never quite sure which ones I've told and which ones I haven't. Well, one that does stick with me is, well, I guess probably my first player kill myself that I did stuck with me. I haven't said it this year, so anyone who heard it last year probably remembers it. But it was where I found these new players to the game, and I was they were
You were praying on them.
No, I was just watching them, and they were at a church, and I decided to talk to them, and I ended up saying, look here, I'll take you to the airfield, because that's where you can find some military. This was with the mod, and we were proceeding across the airfield, and I saw this player in the distance, and I decided to fire some warning shots at the player, but I don't know, I think it was just curiosity or something like that. I just kept shooting, and I ended up killing him. And one of the guys goes, wow, you shot him. And it was kind of the way he said it. It was like, we thought you were a hero, but you killed him. And I remember feeling terrible, and I actually felt really terrible for a couple of days after that. And it really stuck with me for quite a long time.
And then you got over it and kept on killing.
That's right. And now I'm currently under a table, terrified of that. So, yeah.
Holly, what do you think needs to change in the way that games tell stories? Where do you think video games can be better? Where do you think they can be stronger? Just to put you on the spot.
Yeah, gosh.
What would you do? What would you like to see happen in games? What would impress you? What would you, when you would say, that's great, I hope that would happen?
I have a slight obsession at the moment with a really impenetrable analogy that means nothing to almost everyone of sort of current video games as a way of thinking about them, being to think about what was going on in theatre in the 1920s and 30s. Yeah, well, lots and lots of different stuff. So you still had all of these, we were talking about this on the train, you still had all of these massive pseudo-Victorian things with huge painted backdrops and big swaggy curtains and all of that kind of thing, drawing apart, and all of the sort of traditional huge stories that people are melodramatic. But you also have things that are explicitly about questioning the conventions of theatre at the time, and also things that are kind of not really plays, but use the form of plays to do different bits and pieces, and then things that are just like neat and tidy and really nicely made, like tiny little Noel Coward plays with 5 actors that use the form of the traditional big backdrop stuff that's still going on, but don't seem to echo that. So kind of stuff that continues to allow me to think about it using this analogy would be great. So if some people can start recreating like 40s and 50s theatre in video game form so that I don't have to come up with a new analogy to think about it, that would be really handy.
Well, I think that's Dean's next game. So.
Well, I think that's a refreshing way of thinking about it. And how much of it is just driven by technology and the weird thing now is that almost every generation of game playing technology is kind of equally valid. It's like in movie terms, it's like, hey, the indie kids are making black and white hand-cranked silent movies. And that's great. And some people are making a living. That's brilliant. They're making kind of 1930s very stagey dramas. Every camera and film stock is currently available to us in game development terms. And the one thing that wouldn't be acceptable as an aesthetic choice is kind of Quake 3 engine stuff from about 8 years ago. That would be, well, it's too soon to be retro, but unless there's a stylistic choice, it's not clear what that means. And as an example of that, I'd say FTL, which I love and I played a huge amount of. If that had come out 4 years previously, the graphics would have just been bad. Like, hang on, this is clunky and bad and the animations are terrible. Now it's charming, and it seems like a really carefully authored, beautifully intended thing, where actually the fact that the animations have got about 3 frames each is brilliant and part of the game. So as more and more of this as it's easier to make games and more different kinds of people are making games. And it's really startling when you think about it, just what a restricted demographic we're allowed to make games in the last 20 years. And now that's opening up, and hooray, thank goodness for that. But now it's so much easier to make a Twine game, or a Game Maker game, or a Unity game, or any of those things. And now, good lord, Unreal is now fantastic. We're going to get more interesting, meaningful stories. The problem is, out of the box, none of the ways you move coloured blobs around the screen are inherently meaningful. Trying to make those things significant is really tough. And that's something, Thomas was alone, which I liked a lot, because for me it was all about being a younger sibling. It was all about being not quite wanting to keep up, kind of resenting the junior status, but admitting the fact that I wasn't as good as that. And it's like, hang on, this is just a box platform. Look, there's all the DayZ, which is movement, shooting, and inventory management. Look how significant that becomes when it's about survival, when it's about scarcity and kind of existential threat. So you should be able to make good lord, Papers, Please, or Cart Life. You know, these have hardly any graphics at all, and they're deeply involving art games. Well, let's not bring a word into it, but they're deeply significant. You know, the mechanics of the game are pretty primitive, but the implications of them are much more universal, and I'm hoping we'll see a lot more stuff like that.
Fantastic, so the future is bright. I want to open this up now to questions from you, lovely lot. And while you're thinking, there's a microphone in the middle, incidentally, which I'll ask you to go to, lean into, embrace. I don't know how that works. And so if you want to start heading over there if you've got a question now. In the meantime, we're going to play a little game on stage. Does anyone remember Consequences? Not like spin the bottle or something like that, but so we're going to make an impromptu story on stage very quickly while you guys are lining up. So I've got a slide. This is what we're going to do on each page, as quickly as you can. Yeah. Okay, Mike, would you like to start? I've written it out, and then turn the page over when you're done. No cheating, Molly. Yeah. Yeah.
I like what you're saying here about Papers, Please, because with me, one of the most significant screens for the story was actually the end screen where you had to decide who ate. Like that just filled out the game for me, because suddenly everything I did was critically important, because then I was going to have to decide. And Uncle was always screwed, right? He was always screwed. Uncle was first to go. You're like part of the pure bloodline. So I played CK too. I know how.
Okay, we can we'll take a question mark just to make it trickier. While they're thinking of one thing, we'll make them think of something else. Okay, so first question, please. Lean forward and bang on.
Well, like lean
That's
forward.
brilliant.
That is a good look, mate. You look good.
Now it just feels a bit too rock star. Anyway, I wanted to ask, just with what you were talking about where you see storylines developing. Dialogue seems to be somewhere where we've almost reached a bit of a barrier at the moment, that nothing's really developed. This is really weird, nothing seems to develop really far beyond, here's 4 choices of things you might want to say, and I actually don't feel we've got to a point where a player gets to really choose the direction of the story, because they're limited by the dialogue options they've got. So you can choose where to go or which missions to play, but I wonder what development's being made to develop storylines where someone can really choose what they want to ask.
Well, the biggest challenge to that is a technical one, and it's what you said, it's options. Options are finite. Whatever you do with options, and especially if you've got a voice cast, that's an expensive, long process, both in terms of the money spent on actors and microphones and all this stuff, but also just in terms of how much disk space there is, just other things like that. Where it becomes interesting, actually, I think DayZ, just to keep mentioning your game, I'm sure you're not sick of that yet, though. No, it's all good. But that's where DayZ, Minecraft, these kind of games come in, because they provide verbs that are actions. It goes back to what I was saying before. We're making action games. We're making games where you do things, and that's how you express yourself. That's a lot more gradated and analog than any list of text could ever be. And I think that might be the path. In terms of dialogue specifically, I think we need to work out a completely different approach. There will be someone who works this out and it will suddenly open up a whole new world, but for now we're all so limited by, you know, actors and agents and disk space and all that stuff. So we'll see. I quite liked, I remember Facade. Do you ever play Facade?
Nope.
Yeah, Facade. It's a freeware game from it's at least like 10 years old now, right?
No, it can't possibly be 10 years old.
I think it might be, actually. I remember playing it at university. That's great. It's a dinner party game. And you walk in and it uses text and text-to-speech. And it's incredible because actually you walk into this space, you're a guest at a party with like a couple who are in this house, and it can go in a million directions based on what you say, whether you pick up the right glass and whatever, you can break up the couple, you can convince them you can be a zombie. I've seen people role play as a zombie and freak them out. It's an amazing glance at what could be possible one day. So check that out.
I saw a TED talk actually on a similar kind of lines where you build blocks. So maybe that's the route through, changing the way you input dialogue. Anyway.
So with dialogue, it kind of feels like the ideal would be to be able to actually just say what you want and have things respond to it. But if you let people actually do that, which obviously in games of the real world component you often can, people kind of hate it and are terrible at it and sort of stand around awkwardly going, hello, I have come to collect the thing I meant to collect, and the actors have to try really, really super hard to make anyone feel comfortable at all. And obviously there are subcultures like, you know, Nordic LARPing and so on, where people feel comfortable with that, but normal people do not want to be able to say whatever they want.
I have an ambition, and it is that as part of the game install process, you have to read all of the audio lines yourself. With no context whatsoever. So you're stuck in the position of the poor voice actors on early games where they're just given, like, I went to it was a presentation by voice actors on how to not write terrible game dialogue. He said, give some bloody context. Like, he was given this one script and the line was, well, goodbye, son. And it wasn't clear, like, is he going off to war? Is he going shopping? Is he like... so yeah, I just want to force the player to be in their position. The weird thing is about particularly dialogue in terms of actions, is that there are three disciplines. There's writing, there's game design, and there's acting, all of which are obsessed with verbs. If you study screenwriting, it's all about, you know, the scene breakdown is not the clever line of dialogue, it's what is the verb in this scene. What's this scene about? What's the change in? It's an old screenwriting saw. If the relationship between your characters is the same at the end of the scene and the beginning, nothing's happened. It's just talk. Actors, let me understand this technique. It's all about what is my character doing here? Not the adjective, not the adverb. What's the verb? And as designers, we're going, well, what is it? Oh, for us, it's just shoot, blow stuff up. The weird thing in DayZ is when, even though you've actually, in some ways, you've got fewer special attacks and special moves, you've actually got more compound verbs. You've got intimidate. You've got placate. You know, things that are actually really hard to do in, I don't know, with the dialogue tree, actually. So it's weird that all three disciplines are obsessing about those and they're not joining up yet.
It's interesting, actually, the technological limitation I talked about with VO. The one thing that doesn't cost us anything technologically, money-wise, microphones, agents, is motivation, is what's going on in the player's head. So as long as we can provide a palette of tools and verbs that they can use to express whatever the hell they're thinking, they can do all of the expensive, interesting stuff of why am I doing this, why am I not doing this, and that can be, the game can exist in their head to an extent, and that's really exciting.
Thank you. Brilliant, thank you. Next question, please.
Hiya, we're from a fledgling indie games company, Block Games, and we want to ask, what do you wish people had told you a week before you launched your first ever game?
Sleep.
I think the most important thing, particularly if you're thinking about early access, is your game has to be fun when it releases. If you're not thinking about early access and you're fully releasing, I don't know, because we haven't reached that point yet. But definitely with early access, if you're doing any of that kind of alpha stuff, is that what you guys do, or?
Well, we're working for for charity actually. 100% profits go to our chosen charity Gear Productions. So we're releasing next Friday a game called Not GTA 5. Basically a lawsuit waiting to happen.
I can't think why.
Might only be available for 3 days, so probably buy it quickly. But it's just as a 20-minute comedy, fun romp through Great Britain, and we're releasing it on Friday. Just want some advice.
What people often told me when I started making games was stop worrying about all of the tiny little details that no one else but you will notice. That I think, I wish they hadn't told me that. I wish they'd told me continue worrying about every tiny little thing, continue trying to make it as much better as you can, as hard as you can in like the last few days available to you. Everything that you think someone might notice, someone will notice.
Concentrate on the stuff you can actually fix. Because you can expend more energy worrying about something you can't fix than doing anything about it. So the stuff that's within your control. Also work out the exchange rate between the different bits of the game changes over the course of development. Like voiceover is free up until you record it, and then it's the most expensive thing because you can't change it. At different points, some people become, oh, actually we can add some more art really easily, or hang on, we can just reverse that animation so you get that for free. Just watch out for those little economies. We can go, oh wait, there's a much easier way of doing this. Or, you know what, we could spend twice as much time making that 2% better. It's not worth it. You can use that time elsewhere better.
So in summary, worry a lot, but only about the right things, and stop worrying magically when it's bedtime.
Brilliant. Please follow us at Not Games UK.
Thank you. Next question, please.
Hi. Just before I say the question, I just quickly looked up. The Facade was released on 5th of July 2005.
2005.
It's almost 9 years.
Still young!
For my question, I was just wondering, like, I personally love how stories, when developers implement them into the gameplay and really like try and make it part of the experience, but I get worried when they get too carried away with it. Like, this is just my personal opinion, but I didn't like how Mass Effect 3 developers were talking about how they didn't want an end boss because it would be too video gamey. Or when Beyond Two Souls came out last year, I also felt that they went too carried away with storytelling and they drew away from the video game itself, and I feel that can weaken it overall. I was wondering what your opinions on that.
Yeah, I know from my perspective, one of the reasons it's always great to be on these panels, but this is the one I get most scared about when they ask me to fill in. But see, these guys probably know instantly what a verb or an adjective is, but I start going, what the hell is a verb again? Kind of thing. I think I was too busy like trying to throw gum at someone at school doing that bit. So that's why I don't really do a lot of narrative, because I know that I'm not good enough at it to be able to really pull it off. And I think if I started doing it, we'd end up with some crazy, bizarre, hilarious sort of cobbled together or something. I wonder whether it is a slippery slope sometimes, whether it's difficult to find that balance.
You have to play to your strengths, definitely, when you're making games, but also challenge yourself and stretch, but just like control the stretch. All I would say to you, it's interesting actually, it's a conversation that I'm hearing more and more from gamers and players and whatever we want to call ourselves. It seems to change every week on Twitter. There's a frustration that, you know, this specific game does something that feels wrong. I think we should critique stuff. We should absolutely say, I don't like this, because that's how we get better. But I think the most exciting thing right now is that there are so many games. There are more games than there have ever been. The chances are you could name anything you want from a game, and there's probably an idiot somewhere coding it right now, and it's better than you can imagine and expect. So all I would say is we're going to be seeing over the next few years games pushing in really interesting directions, doing really weird stuff. Sometimes it'll work, sometimes it won't. There'll be games you hate, there'll be games that offend you and disgust you with. They're not games, they're walking simulators, or this is disgusting and violent and horrific and embarrassing to our culture. We're going to get angry and excited in equal measure, but it's going to continue. and this is the great thing about this diversity and this enormous new movement of games being made. If you don't like it, there'll be another one along in a minute that you love, and that's exciting to me. So I think it's absolutely okay to dislike those games. It's absolutely okay to be annoyed about Mass Effect. A few people were. I remember reading a forum post somewhere, and I'm not a massive fan of Beyond either. But there are always going to be other games that do it, and I think we should embrace that. We should embrace that there's stuff we hate, because that means there's going to be stuff we love.
There's an old development joke I no longer find even remotely funny, which is that...
Why are you wasting our time with it then?
So YouTube can suffer. Which is that you finish the game with the team you should have started with, and a month after it ships you find out what it's about. The notion that the people who are making a game are the best or even competent judges of what the right balance of the elements are is crazy. I mean, the smaller it is, the easier. The fewer pair of hands and the shorter development cycle, because that means you get to put it in front of players and see what they think. But also, there's just no such thing as a well-formed game. Just as what I'm saying, like, there's no one audience. Well, that's the kind of one of the dirty secrets, if you like, in game design, is that everyone thinks every other gamer is like them, and they're not. You know, we get them up from very hardcore gamers, like, what gamers really want is this. It's like, dude, there's 4,000 of you. Like, it's not enough. In order to get you this game you'll enjoy most of, we've got to make a game that all these people can enjoy too. And that's just the financial, reality of making games on that scale. The smaller, more focused stuff can be much more specific in their audience, which is why I think you get more daring and more satisfying things, because they're just trying to hit one thing perfectly, rather than go, here's something for you, or we don't exclude these people. You can turn into a bit of a kind of munged up mess. But then there's nothing wrong with wanting as many different people as possible to play your game. I don't want to make a game just for me. Well, that seems like a really boring ambition.
Weirdly enough, there's a lot of people that like goats, apparently. There's goat simulators, so there you go.
Thank you very much for your question. Hope that answers it. I'm afraid that's all the time we've got for questions. But I'd like to read you a little story I haven't been writing. It's probably better. So, this is a story as it comes out here. So, verbose Balthazar met amphibious Marilyn at the swingers' night. He wore spats and a towel. She wore a sensible hat. He said to her, "This reminds me somewhat of DayZ." She said to him, "Well, isn't that nice? Well done." The consequence was, the squid became enraged and refused to respond to mind control. Many died. It smelled really bad. What the world said, that was that, and that is that. I'm Bertie, thank you very much, and thank you to my guests, Mike, Holly, Ed, and Dean. Thank you to you guys, enjoy the rest of the show, and come back here to see all the other panels. We've got Zombies, we've got Dean Hall again, with Project Zomboid guys. We've got Eurogame podcast later, we've got the Creative Assembly Game Jam, and there is Frozen Endzone on later as well. So, packed schedule, packed day, enjoy it. Thank you very much.